Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do another episode on health gadgets, and the health gadget I'm using today is going to be the Anova Sous Vide, the Wi-Fi version. And what we're going to do, and I bet you never thought this would happen, we're still talking about heart disease. It's still the middle of summer. It's still beastly hot out, and I am going to cook beef. Bet you didn't see that one coming, right? Okay, so we know heart disease is still the #1 killer in the United States, and the first thing your doctor is going to tell you to not eat is beef. And let me tell you, in Chinese medicine, we look at food completely different than Western medicine does. In fact, you'll never see us put food in a can with a bunch of preservatives and give it to you and say that's really a meal. That's just not going to happen in Chinese medicine. But what is going to happen is we're going to look at all the foods that are out there, and we select foods that support our individual constitution. So what is it about beef, and why can I, with heart disease, eat beef? Well, the thing about beef is it is warming, and it addresses yin deficiency, which if you're over 50, well, if you're over 40, that's going to be one of the most common things that you're going to experience. Is as we age, we start to lose some of our vitality. And in Chinese medicine, one definition of losing vitality is yin deficiency. Now, the thing that's really tragic is in clinic, I've been really surprised that I'm seeing kids, teenagers, and young adults under 30 with yin deficiency that's as severe or more severe than a 55-year-old. So food choices are important, and if you're yin deficient, beef is one of the best ways to help tonify your blood and your yin again. So now with the sous vide, what I like about the sous vide is I can take those cheap cuts of meat, cook them in the sous vide, and they are just amazing. So today I went to the freezer and I just did a blind grab because, you know, my husband and I, we eat all the best cuts of meats first, and then we have the chuck, the pot roast, and everything else left at the end of it. And right now we have pot roast. Now, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this pot roast, cook it in the sous vide, and see how that turns out. So let's take a look at the ingredients that I need, and let's talk a little bit more about the food choices and how we're going to cook it. Okay, so first off, we've got a pot roast, and I'm super lucky because we use a local farmer to grow our beef. It's antibiotic free. It is grass raised for most its life. It's the last 6 to 8 weeks that we finish them up with grain, but they don't have antibiotics and they don't have hormones. It's going to be cooking for a long time. It's going to be cooking for like 2 days, but you know, all you have to do is put your sous vide in a corner someplace and ignore it, and 2 days from now you'll have a meal. What I'm going to add to that though is you always need spices. So I got some sage from the garden, I got some thyme from the garden, I got some rosemary, onions, always onions, and garlic. Now in general, this meal is going to be pretty warming, so what you might want to do is add in some cooling foods with this. And you know, my husband and I were talking and thinking about making a green tea jasmine rice, and that would be cooling, and that would be a great complement to this. So maybe we'll try that and see how that turns out. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut all these up, and I'm going to layer it. You know, we have to put these in a bag and then vacuum seal the bag and then put them in water in the sous vide and turn the sous vide on. Okay, so let's put these spices together. Okay, so first I'm just going to take the leaves of the sage. And sage, again, I said this dish is pretty warming, and sage is warming and it expels phlegm. So what's one of the biggest issues with heart disease is phlegm in the heart channel. So here we've got sage, which expels phlegm, garlic, onions, all of those expel phlegm. They're all kind of warming. So again, that's why I said, hey, you know, if you can, add in something cooling, because this is pretty warm. Now, as I just get these finished up, let's talk about the rosemary and the thyme. Both of those are warming herbs too. So again, you can see why pot roast would be such a great one in the winter, because you would marry it with all these really heavy warming herbs. And thyme is drying. So let's talk about that for a minute, because you know, most people who are on heart meds, they're on something for high blood pressure, but they're also on a diuretic. So thyme drying is like a diuretic, and then rosemary stimulates the digestion. Okay, so let's see here. We're going to use the garlic press for the garlic. I'm not going to cut up the rosemary or the thyme. I'm just going to use it as it is. And so let's cut up the onions. So for me, I use a 6-inch chef knife, and so my husband and I have different chef knives because he uses an 8-inch. And we'll just put these up because we're just going to layer them in the bag. They don't need to be super fancy or anything. And let's grab a bag here to put them in. I'm going to put some of the sage on the bottom first. And I'm going to put some of the onions on the bottom. Oh my gosh, these herbs. Nothing like herbs grown in the garden. They are so fragrant. Just so fragrant. And I wouldn't have thought that they were harvesting onions right now, but I can tell you, my eyes didn't water cutting this one, so I would think that this is closer to this season. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the garlic press, and I'm just going to press some garlic on top, flip it over, and put it in the bag. Okay, let's open this bag and see if I can put some thyme in there. Grab some rosemary. Let's see if we can flip this guy over and slide him on in. You know, and these chucks, or these pot roasts and chucks and all of that, they're always such big pieces of meat. So you want to cook something that, you know, you can use over a few days if there's only a couple of you in the house. So, well, actually I'm going to put the rosemary down first. Grab some more garlic. One of the key issues with heart disease is phlegm in the heart channel. So all of these herbs are warming, but they all break up phlegm, help the digestion, help eliminate water. And then we have the beef, which is warming and tonifies yin. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is just seal up this bad boy and then set up the Nova sous vide to cook. Okay, so we vacuum sealed the pot roast, and I've got my Anova here. And one of the things I would recommend is, if you're going to use these Anova sous vides, you have to get the container to do the sous vide. I tried doing it without the container and without the nifty little lid that comes with it. I can just say it doesn't work. If you don't get these two things, you're going to ruin every meal that you put together. So, and then the sous vide will not seem like such a fun thing. Now the other thing that I did that I got was a sous vide rack to hold this in place, and that's weighted so it will hold, it will stay on the bottom of your pan. And let's see here, we'll just slide this guy in. And oh, it looks like I put too much water in, so I'm gonna have to take some water out and then slide it the rest of the way in. Okay, so we're gonna set the temperature, which you just have to turn this. We're gonna set the temperature to 131. And the thing about cooking with sous vides is turning the temperature up is not your friend. The sous vides are about long time cooking in a water bath, and it's the time that starts breaking down the collagen and the muscle fibers so that the meat becomes really, really soft and succulent. And if you turn this up because you want to get it done sooner, you might as well just throw it in the oven on a high temperature, because it's just going to turn out like shoe leather. And then the next thing that you have to do is set your time, and you press down the play button, and there's a timer, and we are going to do 48 hours, and we're going to set that. Okay, so it has to get up to 131, and it's going to go for 2 days. So here's the other reason why I say get this container, because this container will last for the 48 hours and you won't have to refill it. If you have to refill your water, and if your sous vide turns off and you lose temperature, then your meat's ruined. So you can't start back up and try and get to temperature again. It doesn't work that way. This wants you to go 48 hours, 1 to 48, no breaks in between, and then it'll be perfect. Okay, so there we are. I guess I'll see you in 48 hours. Okay, so we're about 12 hours into it. Everything's still cooking well. We're holding at 131 degrees, and I guess we'll see how we do in a few more hours. Okay, here we are at 36 hours. The temperature is still at the exact right temperature that it needs to be. And here you can see the other reason why I really like these containers. I haven't opened this container or added water since we started 36 hours ago, and it's still completely full. Without this container, this water would have been evaporating. I would have ruined this meat completely. Okay, we have almost made our 48 hours, so it's going to be about time to take the pot roast off. But remember, when we started this, I had mentioned that all the spices, the meat, all of those were warming, so it's kind of a hot meal, and it's summer right now. It's 95 degrees outside, so I want to cool this meal off a little bit, maybe try and get it back to neutral. And so what I'm going to do to mix with this is I am going to do a green tea rice. So let's look at that, okay? Let's first start out with the green tea. So cast iron pot, you know, in Chinese medicine, they want you to use cast iron, or they want to use steel or glass. They don't want you using things like aluminum or other things that leach into your herbs. And I'm gonna do green tea. And what is green tea? So it's actually tea leaves, and Chinese medicine, or the Chinese grow tea like we grow wines, grapes for wines. And so you can actually get tea leaves from different estates, and they will have lot numbers, and estate names, and so just like you'd buy a bottle of wine, like a Pinot Noir from one of the wineries here in the Northwest, you can do the same thing with teas. And green tea, again, it's cooling. They're twisted leaves, so real tea is twisted leaves. They look like little balls, and you don't need a lot. Just a couple leaves, really. This is probably enough right there, but I'll add 3-4 more. I'm going to put that back, put the strainer back into the tea pot and add in some water. I'm going to let that boil for about a half hour. Okay, I'll see you in a half hour. Okay, here's our old faithful again, the Instapot. We're going to make the rice in that. And the thing is, you know, I'm going for a cooling sensation now. So I am going to add in some peppermint, and I'm also going to add in some lemon balm. So both of these are cooling. Peppermint is cooling on the stomach. Lemon balm is cooling on the liver. And pretty much almost 100% of the time here in the US, when we have heart disease, we have a ton of heat in the liver channel. So in Chinese medicine, you're always managing that liver channel. So let's put in our jasmine rice. Now the other thing I'm going to put in here is my favorite, saffron, right? Because you don't need a lot of saffron. And saffron is cooling also. So I'm going to put some saffron in there, probably more than I usually would. And now let's add in the green tea. Now with the green tea, we just need 2 cups of water. So there's 1, 2. Remember, in general, it's a 1-to-1. I like mine just a little bit more like sushi, so I put in a little bit more water. So I'm just going to stir this a little bit to make sure that everything's mixed up in here. And then I'm going to put it back in the Instapot. Now this time you noticed I didn't put in salt, I didn't put in bouillon, and part of that is because the choice was green tea, right? I'm going to press start on this. 4 minutes start. Green tea is just such a really light and cooling taste that I wanted to make sure that everything else that I put in here had that same light cooling taste, which bouillon doesn't have. You know, all those spices like cumin, turmeric, those are all warming spices, and I already have enough warming spices with pot roast. So here we go. This has 4 minutes to go, and then we'll have our green tea rice to go with our pot roast. And then the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to cut up some vegetables with this. So let's look at the vegetables that I'm going to choose. Okay, this is what I chose. I chose a cucumber, cilantro, and tomatoes, and tomato knives. These work just great. This tomato is a bit ripe, so it can be a little bit squishy, and these tomato knives go right through them. It doesn't matter what the tomato feels like. Tomato knives cut it up, no problem. And I wonder, I think I'm going to cut these into halves. Then the next vegetable, or my next selection was an herb, and this is cilantro. Cilantro is very cooling, and it's detoxifying, so it helps clean out the phlegm in the body, and again, it's very cooling. So you might not want to go too hog wild on it, because it can cool your stomach off a little bit too much, and nobody likes those results. So the next thing I did was a cucumber, and this is an organic cucumber here, grown here in the States. You know, here's my deal. It's summer. As much as I can, I try to get all my vegetables here in the States, because vegetables that cross borders might have to get radiated, and I have enough health problems as it is. I just don't need to add to it. So I'm going to take the skin off of the cucumber, and you could leave it on and eat it with the skin, but you know, in general I think right now that's a little bit too bitter. So some big pieces of cucumber. And cucumbers are very, very cooling. So these are always a great one. And if you remember in the Breville, it goes over cucumbers and cabbage. So those are the vegetables I'm going to mix with this. So everything else besides the pot roast is going to be really cooling. And hopefully that makes this meal light enough for us to survive it in summer. Okay, so one of the last things we get to do is we get to plate this. And I'm going to put the rice out here first. And one of the things you're going to notice is, look how much, this isn't just the saffron. You see how yellow the rice is? I did use a lot of saffron, but it's also the green tea. The green tea water helped to bring in a darker color on the rice. So, you know, the one thing that's cool about that is it's nice and colorful, and it should accent the meat really well. So the usual, I like putting the rice around the outside, and then what I'm going to do is something a little bit different. We're going to add the vegetables. Before I put the meat out there, I am going to put the vegetables around here. Okay, and so let's start with the cilantro, okay? Nice and cooling. Great add to the rice. And that's just to add in some color. Again, you don't have to plate these, but I'm going to. So now I'm going to add in the tomatoes next, because the tomatoes can be a nice bed for the meat. That red color should really help bring the meat out a bit. And I want to use all my tomatoes, so there's that. And then I want to add in the cucumbers. There's the cucumbers. And these things don't have to be perfect, because we're going to cover it up with that pot roast. Okay, tell you what, I think we should get the pot roast, okay? I'm going to salt this and pepper it, and we're going to put it in a skillet to finish it off. Okay, so you can hear it searing now, and that's going to take just a few minutes to finish that up. And so let's let that finish up, and we'll come back when I'm ready to put it on the rice. Okay, so let's talk about this. So we chose beef, and you can see this really did come off super succulent and really easy to just cut right through. But we chose beef because in Chinese medicine, beef tonifies yin. And you know, with heart disease, you're going to have yin deficiency, you may have yang deficiency, and so beef is very, very tonifying. And the other thing about beef is it's warming. So I would guess that, you know, from a Western medicine perspective, part of the reason why beef is so tonifying for the yin is all the proteins in it. But let's talk about heart disease. If you're at the point where you have heart disease, you know, you're probably saying, well, my cholesterol level's too high and I can't eat this. And that might be true. yet, you know, my dad had heart disease, and he did everything Western medicine said to do. And let me tell you, from a diet perspective and everything, it didn't appear to be the right answer, because he ended up dying of a heart attack. So I get, you're like, I've got high cholesterol and I can't eat meat, and that may be so. I think if you're working with a really good Chinese medical practitioner, you guys can find some solutions to that. You can also find herbal formulas that you can use for high cholesterol, and you can also start looking at your overall food choices and what's causing problems for detoxing in your liver to help reduce those levels. Either way, let's say you have heart disease, you're going to have yin deficiency, but you're also probably going to have yang deficiency, and you always will have heat. You're just going to have a ton of heat someplace in your body. So when you decide to use a warm food like meat, like beef, you're going to want to marry it with cooling foods to help offset that heat, because you don't need more heat in your body. Additional heat will help increase your blood pressure, will give you more anxiety, make it more difficult for you to sleep, cause you to have excess sweating or night sweating or hot flashes. And so what we did with this one is we took the beef, but then everything else in this dish is very cooling. And you know, almost all the vegetables that you grow in summer are cooling. And one of my instructors uses the term juicy. All the juicy things are cooling. And that's a pretty good rule of thumb, that in general, most of the juicy vegetables are cooling. So let's put this meat onto the plate. Okay, so there's our rice and our vegetables, and I'm just going to add in some pot roast in the center. I gotta say, that pot roast really came out tender, and it really does taste good. The external part has a bit of the lemon taste from the lemon thyme, but the rest of it, it's a really good soft meat that you're going to be able to eat with a fork. So I'm just going to pile all of this on here. I'll add in a few more of my cucumbers because I want to eat that whole cucumber. I love cucumbers. Juicy and cooling, very cooling. And there you have it. There's your pot roast to help with your heart disease. Okay, until next time, I'll catch you guys on the other side.